and welcome to CATSweek. I'm Annalise Poorman. At the April 30th coronavirus press conference, Monroe County Health Administrator Penny Caudill talked about an upcoming vaccination site at the Boys and Girls Club. She said the resources from the Bloomington Convention Center site would be going towards outreach programs to help eliminate barriers to receiving vaccines.
We have volunteers and staff who are going door to door this weekend to encourage people to come to that clinic to sign up so we can be prepared for a full time of vaccinations. And then I want to give a huge thank you to our community partners who are serving the Hispanic and Latinx community. Our goal is certainly to provide information, answer questions, reduce barriers like language. And we have an outreach clinic that is planned. We've got more communication that will be coming out on that as well.
Caudill said some local vaccine sites have been taking walk-ins as well. Indiana University Assistant Vice President Kirk White confirmed that Assembly Hall is accepting walk-ins starting an hour after the site opens. The Boys and Girls Club pop-up vaccination site will be open May 6th. The Bloomington Redevelopment Commission discussed whether a dog training business could access city property. At the May 3rd meeting, Director of Economic and Sustainable Development Alex Crowley presented a resolution that would allow Mannered Mutts Training, LLC, to use an empty lot in the Trades District. He described this as an opportunity to help a local business in a time where local businesses are struggling.
Sort of small business, try to get launching some dog training, reached out to my department to ask whether or not the open land in the Trades District might be available to help them up. And we thought, nobody's using it right now. Obviously, we want to make sure it's kept clean and that, everything's done by the book on this, but to help a small business out, especially at a time when, everybody's been struggling a little bit, we thought it'd be a nice, simple way to do it.
Commissioner Deborah Meyerson asked about the typical review process for these kinds of requests. Crowley replied, these requests are usually ad hoc. He said the city is flexible with these requests because they are not often made.
We do think that, we want to be fairly rigorous about it. Obviously, we don't want to have a free-for-all out there. And by having the approval process through the RDC, it allows us to also know who's out there staging it, making sure, there's not contention and that sort of thing. And hopefully it goes without saying that this is going to be not a long-term problem because we do anticipate development there. And so at some point it becomes a moot point. But for the time being, we wanted to be as flexible as possible.
The Redevelopment Commission unanimously passed the resolution. The Bloomington City Council met for a special session on May 4th to continue the discussion of duplexes in the Unified Development Ordinance. The special session picked up where last week's meeting left off, with public comment on a proposed amendment that would disallow duplexes in residential zones 1 through 3. Resident Tom Schaefer expressed concern that allowing duplexes in certain residential zones goes against Bloomington's comprehensive plan.
This year's UDO, while nominally furthering the city's comprehensive plan, actually goes against the spirit and letter of its recommendations, among which is this one, quote, existing core neighborhoods should not be the focus of the city's increasing density, unquote. This is one of a half a dozen or so specific statements in the comp plan that say that new housing be developed outside the core neighborhoods. Why does this proposed UDO work so hard against the comprehensive plan?
Councilmember Steve Voland argued that city planning staff had been following the letter of the plan. He said the focus on one sentence of one policy has been at the expense of the rest of the comprehensive plan.
All we're focused on is policy 5.3.1 and one sentence in it. One sentence. That last sentence, avoid placing these high-density forms of single-family neighborhoods, was the result of Amendment 49 to Ordinance 1728, sponsored by former Councilmember Sturbaum. It obviously runs counter to the rest of Policy 5.3.1, which calls for increased residential densities and to utilize the very types that the Planning and Transportation Department has been suggesting. They have been following the comp plan.
Councilmember Dave Rollo acknowledged that more people spoke against duplexes than in support of them during public comment. Councilmember Ron Smith suggested this showed that duplexes are against the will of Bloomington's constituents. Councilmember Isabel Piedmont Smith refuted this, saying she had not heard from her constituents.
I represent people who live in Henderson Court, Acadia Court, Timber Ridge, Summit Point, Barclay Square, Walnut Springs, Walnut Grove, Walnut Woods, and Oaklawn Terrace, just to name a few multifamily housing developments in District 5. I have not heard from any of them. So when I hear people say, look, everybody that has spoken tonight, or the vast majority, are in favor of Amendment 1, that doesn't mean a vast majority of my constituents are in favor of Amendment 1.
The council voted against the amendment 4-5, with council members Dave Rollo, Sue Scambaluri, Susan Sandberg, and Ron Smith voting yes. The Monroe County Board of Health discussed local COVID-19 regulations at their May 4th meeting. Health Administrator Penny Caudill suggested that the Board of Health meet more than once a month to discuss changes to coronavirus regulations. She said meeting more often may be necessary if the Indiana legislature passed a bill that would force county commissioners to approve local health measures.
There is a new process with the anticipation of Senate Bill 5. When you change regulations, they will need to then go to the commissioners for approval before they go into effect. So the timing will be a little bit different. So Margie and I were talking earlier with Dr. Sharp and think it may be worthwhile for you to plan on meeting every other week just for maybe a quick meeting to look at regulations, see if there's anything to change. In order to get something changed prior to the 28th, we would recommend that you think about meeting, say, on May 19th. And then those would have time to go to the commissioners the following Wednesday.
During the meeting, County Attorney Margie Rice broke news that Governor Eric Holcomb had vetoed the bill. Chairperson Kay Leach brought up difficulties in educating residents on changes to COVID-19 restrictions. Caudill identified that as the biggest issue when making incremental changes to restrictions.
Incremental changes are honestly what makes the most scientific sense, is you make small changes so that you can look and see what the response is to that. But every time you make very small incremental changes with this, it is much more difficult to communicate those changes with the public and the businesses and various entities.
Board members voted to keep the current regulations in place. The regulations will be reviewed again at the next Board of Health meeting. And we'll have more CATSweek after this message.
Let's talk about sex.
What is consent?
And what's not?
Consent is based on choice.
Consent is active, not passive.
Consent is giving permission without feeling pressure.
What is not consent?
Silence.
Passed out.
Intoxicated.
Fear.
Is
It is not consent.
God consent?
Ask.
Sex without consent is a crime. Only yes means yes.
Welcome back to CATSweek. The Monroe County Personnel Administration Committee discussed a potential new job in county government. Administrator Angie Purdy formally presented the Public Information Coordinator role. She said the proposed position includes changes as suggested by the Monroe County Council.
In an attempt to clarify how this person works, I made some changes. So serving as a data source for participating departments of Monroe County government. And so if that department is not interested in sharing information, then this person will not receive that information.
Committee member Marty Hawk expressed concern that this position would act as the voice of county government. She talked about the importance of letting elected officials speak individually on topics they'd like to address.
Any one of us should be able to speak on that. We should not have to run it through the Board of Commissioners to get permission to speak. And I won't, just an FYI. If I see information that has been presented or was a part of a public meeting, I intend to speak on it if I feel like that is something I should do. And I hope all of the council feels that way, because that's really a part of what we are elected to do. They expect to hear from the elected official, not some hired person to be our voice.
Committee member Eric Spoonmore moved to send the rule to further development. The committee voted to do so 2-1, with Hawk voting no. The Bloomington City Council met twice on May 5th. At its regular session, Parking Services Director Michelle Wall presented an ordinance that changes how the city handles unpaid parking citations. She said residents with 6 or more unpaid tickets who have their car towed would have to pay the city before being able to recover their car from the tow company. At last week's City Council Committee of the Whole, council members showed concern that this policy could lock low-income residents away from their cars indefinitely. Wall provided some examples of ways residents could get their car back from impound.
One, of course, is proof of ownership, but the first one is payment of the entire fee, or there is a second clause in there that says payment of 20% of fees and execution of payment agreement for the fee balance. So I'll give you an example. So if you're towed, you go to the tow company, it's $135. You can say, hey, payment of 20% of the fees based on Municipal Code 1548.020 says I can pay 20% of this. 20% of 135 is $27. But they have to do a payment agreement with the tow company that has their vehicle.
The council unanimously approved the ordinance. The Bloomington City Council then met for their special session to continue discussion on multiplex buildings in residential zones. Councilmember Isabel Piedmont Smith proposed an amendment that would change duplexes in residential zones from by right to conditional use. Development Services Manager Jackie Scanlon added that city staff had recommended conditional use in the original proposal.
Our original proposal from staff to council was for conditional use, so we have no objection. This amendment 2 fixes the asterisk use specific standard issue that we have raised. The conditional use process allows another layer of review, allows an opportunity for voices to be heard and issues to be discussed. And again, as with the ADUs, we think conditional use is appropriate with the reintroduction of this use.
Councilmember Susan Sandberg brought up concerns with parking in crowded neighborhoods. She asked Scanlon about adding parking restrictions to the list of conditions petitioners must meet to build.
Staff would not have any objection, perhaps, if we might want to amend slightly, just to make sure we have adequate criteria that does put teeth in conditional.
Sure. So it's hard because we have the one thing I guess I would say is that we have the condition directly related to providing adequate public services and facilities. So if the issue is off-site parking, I think that could already be covered in the street portion of that. But yes, I think if that is a concern, of the majority of the group, that is something that could be discussed. Yeah.
The council voted unanimously to adopt Amendment 2. The Monroe County Board of Zoning Appeals discussed the site plan for a new home off East Moores Creek Road. At their May 5th meeting, Senior Planner Tammy Behrman presented a request to build a new home in Perry Township. She recommended the board deny the variances, suggesting the petitioner could build in an area with fewer slopes.
So staff recommends for both variances denial. And the reasoning for that is there are no practical difficulties. The slope issues could be reasonably addressed through redesign and relocation of the development, building, and structure. And that, I would say, is for the house with the attached garage.
Petitioner Stephen Emery argued that the current proposed site plan minimizes the amount of driveway. He said the current proposed garage is on the flattest part of the property.
By putting the house in this location, you're minimizing the amount of driveway that would be needed. This this was the location of the historic driveway on the property. As you can see from one of the earlier pictures that I think Tammy shared, it's essentially already a driveway. It's flat as can be. This area right here was an apron in front of the demolished garage, which sat right about in this area. And by locating here again, this driveway apron will be on the flattest part of the property, again, minimizing disturbance compared to the other examples that, I'll just shoot one up here that Keenan put up for you. There'd have to be a lot more cut and fill. Well, this one's not a good one because this one's so close right up against the setback that vehicles have to back out onto this downhill southbound lane of Swartz Ridge. It's very, very dangerous, as Keenan pointed out. This one, for example, you've got a lot of grade change here. So you'd have to do a tremendous amount of cut and fill, probably mostly fill, to be able to even access this garage and build a decent apron out in front of it, resulting in a lot more impervious surface.
Board member Bernie Garitas moved to approve the variances under the condition that the petitioner provide a stormwater pollution and prevention plan and a drainage plan. Board members unanimously approved the variances. And we'll have more Cats Week after this message.
For hurting families in Monroe County.
A contribution to children who are vulnerable and in need of an advocate.
A staff that goes above and beyond to support and advocate for children in need of services.
The web of remarkable people who are dealing with difficult situations.
So many young people that are in need of help and trying to find a stable family, a stable place to live. Without the CASAs to make that happen, many of them would be unable to find a good home.
I love being that voice for the child who can't speak for themselves in court.
It takes me out of my comfort zone, and it also helps others.
CASA means supporting our community.
Being a CASA is making sure that your village is healthy and whole, and that the children in your village will someday be able to help the village as well.
A child who doesn't have a voice, maybe in their family situation or a school situation, now has a voice that can advocate for them.
I really enjoy working with children that are going through difficult times and letting them know that I care about their future.
We are privileged with our charge of representing the best interest of children. And so therefore we can advocate for exactly what they need without restriction, focusing on their best interest.
I want to repair the world one child at a time.
Welcome back to Cats Week. The Monroe County Commissioners discussed funding for rural transit at their May 5th meeting. Chief Executive of Area 10, Chris Myers, said the additional funds would help modernize rural transit's fleet.
We're looking to replace one low-floor minivan and then 5 buses. This will get us so that our oldest fleet will be 2016 and 2022. So we'll actually finally be kind of caught up with our replacement plan. It's been a few years in coming, but we're very happy to be able to do that.
Commissioner Lee Jones expressed excitement that rural transit would be able to serve more areas with the funds. The commissioners approved the funding 2-0. Planning Director Kevin Talati presented a request to rezone a residential area at the May 6 Ellettsville Plan Commission meeting. Talati said the petitioner would like to rezone an area at North Constable Drive from single-family use to multifamily use. He clarified to Commissioner Sandra Hash that although the zone currently has a multifamily home on the lot, the area would need to be officially rezoned to allow the petitioner to build an additional 2-unit structure.
Roughly, this square would be about 8,000 square feet, and that's the area they'd be looking at adding an additional structure, which would include any off-street parking.
Kevin, does 8,000 square feet equal a quarter an acre?
No.
I thought a quarter an acre was our minimum.
Yeah, it's just, well, and that's why they're wanting it rezoned, because it wasn't large enough to subdivide. If you rezone it to multifamily, you don't have to have a separate lot for each unit.
Commissioner Pat Wesolowski asked about rent prices. He questioned petitioner Thomas Landis about whether the units would be low-income compatible.
If I read the information correctly, you're going to charge around $1,250 for it per month?
Well, yeah, that would be what the rents would be considered to be within the 30% range of the median income. I suspect our rents would be closer to 1,000 or 1,050, which is where they are now.
Because for low income, that sure isn't a low income price.
Well, that's true.
Hash shared concerns around water drainage on the property. Wesolowski moved to table the request so the town could do more research. The Plan Commission unanimously approved the motion. The next Plan Commission meeting is on June 3rd. The Bloomington City Council met for its third special session on multiplexes on May 6th. Council member Dave Rollo presented an amendment to the ordinance that would put caps on the number of duplexes that can be built in a residential zone. He said the amendment would help prevent investors from buying and converting too many single-family homes into duplexes.
The first component is revived from what was proposed prior to the Plan Commission review last month. It is a buffer on essentially concentrating this form to maintain housing diversity in neighborhoods, preventing a monoculture of duplexes within a 150-foot buffer. The second amendment component of this amendment, of Amendment 3, the cap functions as a governor on the rate in which these forms occur.
Councilmember Matt Flaherty asked for clarification around the proposed cap of 15 duplex approvals. He asked Development Services Manager Jackie Scanlon how applications beyond the cap would be handled.
Let's say we have 10 or 12 built and one owner sign up or get in the queue for all 30 of their properties. And they take up the waiting list for the next year. Is there a waiting list? Again, this idea of like favoring potentially folks with more capital or more savvy, which is actually, I think, the exact opposite of what both missing middle housing and kind of the intent of folks is, which is that we want to encourage small scale local development. So I'm not saying this is likely. I'm just wanting to think through it.
So I think if we were to have 15 happen quickly and there was lots of interest, we would be reporting to you all, to the decision-making bodies, about what those 15 are, who has interest, to see if you all, again, in the administration, think that number should be increased or decreased, or that it's the appropriate number. I don't think that our plan will be to have a queue and so then to say, okay, you're the 15, because the queue, the 15 is approvals from the Board of Zoning Appeals, and we can't say who's going to get one. So, people can apply, and then once 15 have been done, then it's done.
Councilmember Susan Sandberg added that this situation is exactly why she supports the preventive actions of this amendment. She said the council cannot control whether local or outside investors can buy and convert houses.
I would just say this is the gambit, isn't it? I mean, this is what we're dealing with right now. Anytime you do something new and you open up the gates for anyone, to come forward and to apply for a permit to take a home and convert it to a duplex, that's the risk we're all taking here. And we cannot control if this is going to be done by outside investors or by local companies or by homeowners themselves. That's the problem. And that's the reason why I think it is so critically important for the public sector to put as many guardrails up as we possibly can to try to control some of the excesses that could occur, but we don't have control all over it.
The council voted to adopt the amendment 7-2, with council members Steve Volan and Isabel Piedmont Smith voting against. The City Council will continue discussion on duplexes at its May 12th special session. And that is all for CATSweek. Thank you for joining us. For CATS and WFHB, I'm Annalise Poorman.